So I'm like really special, okay? I didn't know that we had rap music for New Thought churches. Is that totally cool or what? Oh, golly. Well, what is compassion? When I was thinking about this talk and everything, I thought, well, let's go back to the original story of compassion, the Good Samaritan. And so I looked up all this stuff to find out, to pretend like I knew what I was talking about, you know. And the parable of the Good Samaritan is a parable told by Jesus in the book of Luke in the Bible. And he told it to a lawyer who was asking him questions, because the lawyer stood up and he said, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And so Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And the lawyer said, well, it says you shall love love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said to him, you have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. But the lawyer said, well, who is my neighbor? Jesus answered, a certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who both stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. By chance, a certain priest was going down that same road, and when he saw the poor fellow, he passed him by on the other side. In the same way, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he traveled, came where he was, and when he saw the guy, well, Jesus wouldn't say guy, but anyway, when he saw him, he was moved with compassion, came to him and bound up his wounds, and he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. So the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the host and said, take care of him. Whatever you spend beyond that, I'll repay you when I return. Now, which of these 3, Jesus asked him, do you think seemed to be a neighbor to him who fell among the robbers? The Lord said, well, the one who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Well, this is interesting because the background of the Good Samaritan story tells us that Jesus was talking to Jewish people in this little incident. And the Jews hated the Samaritans because the Samaritans had destroyed the Jews hated the Samaritans because the Samaritans had desecrated the Jewish temple at Passover by putting human bones in it. And so the Jews hated them, the Samaritans, and so they destroyed the Samaritans' temple on Mount Gerizim. So we've got all this hatred going on between these two groups. Apparently, though, this particular Samaritan that came along didn't carry any grudges. So what is compassion? I read this quote that said, his name was Arthur Frederick Buechner, and he describes the meaning of compassion in these words. Compassion is sometimes the fatal capacity for feeling what it's like to live inside somebody else's skin. Isn't that great? To live inside somebody else's skin. The etymology of compassion is Latin, and with my Spanish I was thinking, okay, compassion, compasión, I was trying to figure it out, so I looked it up. And it says that in Latin it comes from compasión, and it means co-suffering. So, in ordinary language, compassion is the desire to alleviate another's suffering. Compassion literally means to suffer together, con pasión. empathy. Among emotional researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you're confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. Compassion motivates people to go out of their way to help a physical and mental or emotional problem that somebody else might have. Compassion is a feeling you get if you're human. But I also know that compassion is felt by animals. Our friend Reverend Terry tells the story of when she was wounded in that car wreck, when she was finally able to be taken out into her corral where her horse Ace is. She said that Jerry took her out in there, and Ace came over to her and put his head on her shoulder. So, okay, so that sounds fine, you know. But we might just think of that as like touchy-feely, sweet stuff, you know. But scientists have started to map the biological basis of compassion, suggesting the deep evolutionary purpose. And I never thought of that, you know, as compassion having anything to do with evolution. This research has shown that when we feel compassion, our heart rate slows down, we secrete the bonding hormone oxytocin, and regions of the brain linked to empathy, caregiving, and feelings of pleasure light up, which often results in our wanting to approach and care for other people. When one of Charles Darwin's daughters died at the age of 10, Darwin started to have these deep insights about the place of suffering and compassion in human experience. This led him to argue in the book, The Descent of Man, that sympathy is our strongest instinct, sometimes stronger than self-interest. And he has argued that enough that it would spread through natural selection. For the most sympathetic members would flourish best and rear the greatest number of offspring. So, excuse me. Excuse me. This point, the point has been forgotten through the years a lot by evolutionary scientists, but when you think about all the awful things that people can do to each other and are doing to each other on the planet now, it's hard to make the argument that our strongest feeling is sympathy. The answer lies, and I love this because I found out all this neat stuff when I was looking everything up, you know. The answer lies in the dependence and vulnerability of our children. Little baby chimpanzees, for example, can stand up by themselves. They can eat by themselves. They can sit up by themselves. But human babies can't sit up or eat by themselves for quite some time. And the reason for this is that human babies' heads are so big, and because our brains are so big, okay? To fit their big heads through the human birth canal, which narrows as we started to walk upright in the African savanna, our babies were born profoundly premature and dependent upon people to take care of them. Huh, who knew? In fact, our babies are the most vulnerable offspring on the face of the earth. Yeah. And that simple fact changed everything. It rearranged our social structures, building comparative cooperative networks of caretaking, and it rearranged our nervous systems. We became the super caregiving species, to the point where acts of care improve our physical health and strengthen and lengthen our lives. We are born to be good to each other. Huh. It's kind of hard to believe, you know. So what happens in the brain when we observe pain, when we feel it ourselves or we see it in somebody else? I had to look up all this stuff because it was fascinating. You know, compassion, I never thought of it like this, you know, that this is like we're hardwired for it. You know, and I started looking it up to see what the deal was because, I don't know, compassion is what people feel, right? Oh, yeah. You can see our natural connectivity and compassionate instincts in how our brains react to pain. If you hurt yourself, the anterior cingulate region of your brain will light up. Okay? But if you see somebody else suffering, that very same part of the cortex activates in you if you see somebody else suffering. We have the same pain response to other people's pain as we do to our own experience of pain. We are wired to empathize. And here's the really neat part. That's not the only part of the brain that lights up when we see images of suffering and distress. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, activates. And that's no surprise, since if we see somebody in danger, we may think, oh my gosh, you know, maybe I'm in danger too, you know. But there's another area that lights up, and this is the really neat part. A very old part of the mammalian nervous system called the periaqueductal gray. Periaqueductal gray, no, wait. The periaqueductal gray. Way down in the center of the brain in mammals. This region is associated with nurturing behavior. We don't just see suffering as a threat. We also instinctively want to alleviate that suffering through nurturance. There's evidence that these feelings can bridge social divisions. Research has found that if you can get people to feel compassion, they start to feel deeply connected to different groups of people. In particular, they feel like they're similar to and share a common humanity with people who are really in need and who are really vulnerable. Cultivating this feeling of compassion makes people more attuned to who is in need and enables more altruistic behavior toward them. And again, this is all still like really instinctive. And this is what I really found fun. Compassion has to do with evolution. There's one final crucial social effect of compassion, and it goes back to Darwin and evolution. To pass your genes to the next generation, you've got to have qualities that make you attractive as a partner, or in evolutionary language, as a mate. Okay? Remember, researcher David Bruce generated a lot of controversy. He went out and he studied 10,000 different people from 37 different countries. And he asked them, what is most important to you in a mate? Women were more interested in men's financial prospects than men were in women's. So according to this study, women valued resources a little more. And no surprise, men were a bit more interested in women's beauty than women were in men's looks. But there was another result that nobody talked about, and it was this. Kindness was found to be the most important criterion for a mate. And the single universal requirement across all these 10,000 people in 37 countries, kindness. People are looking for kindness as a mating strategy. Compassion is essential to our evolutionary history. It defines who we are as a species, and it serves our greatest needs as individuals to survive, to connect, and to continue the species. Well, today the story is particularly applicable. We will see that we have trouble interacting and relating to people who are different from us. So the parable regains its message to modern listeners, namely that an individual of a social group they disapprove of can exhibit moral behavior that is superior to individuals of another group or to themselves. It presupposes the identification of anyone as a neighbor, then presses the points that such an identification opens wide the door of loving action. In other words, we are seeing that we can feel compassion and acceptance and caring for somebody in a group that we used to think were bad people, or we disapproved of them, or we felt like they shouldn't be here. What happens when you really can't take away from, well, wait, let me stop this. So we're thinking about all the different, one of the things that's really neat that I've noticed in advertisings, and maybe y'all have noticed it too, more and more Black people and Caucasian people are interacting and doing things together in the advertising. Have you noticed that? And I saw this one last night. It showed a wedding, and it showed a Caucasian girl and an African-American young man at their wedding, and it showed the fathers of the bride and groom and the mothers of the brides and all these different people in all different colors, and they were all having a great time at this party. What is that saying to us? Well, besides the advertisers wanting to make money, somebody back there in the background says, hey, you know what? Let's just do this. How can it hurt? It might even help. I know that sounds strange to take an advertisement on TV as a sign of reasons to hope, but really, when you think about it, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, no. So we're coming along. But now, what happens if you can't really take away somebody's pain, even though you really want to and you're trying so hard to? You can be there, physically and emotionally, to guide them, to hold out a hand, to lift them up when they fall down, to be their biggest cheerleaders. Sometimes all you can do is be there. But just being there might be enough. And in fact, it may be the most profound expression of compassion. Just being there for someone can bring hope when all else feels hopeless. It's the feeling that, wow, I'm not alone in this. Maybe this other person really understands what I'm going through. Now, I'm a fan of the TV show NCIS, and there was one show where the lab assistant, Abby, had been written out of the script, and it showed her leaving on the last episode of the series. And during that episode where it showed her leaving the lab and everything, there was this music going. And these guys, Isaac Slade, Joseph King, David Welch, and Ben Wasaki, wrote a song, the title of which is most likely inspired by Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." When darkness comes upon you and colors you with fear and shame, be still and know that I'm with you, and I will say your name. If terror falls upon your head and sleep no longer comes, remember all the words I said. Be still, and know. And when you go through the valley and the shadow comes down from the hill, if morning never comes to be still, be still, be still. If you forget the way to go and lose the place you came from? If no one is standing beside you, be still and know I am. Just to give the correct salutation to the Center for Spiritual Living, which is a New Thought Metaphysical Church, I thought I'd look up or try to figure out what the metaphysical meaning of the whole story of the Good Samaritan is. And it can apply to a very personal, it can be a very personal thing. Metaphysically, a man's neighbor is his nearest and most intimate embodied thought. Okay. The body is our nearest and most intimate embodied thought. Therefore, the body is our neighbor. The man who was stripped and beaten and left half dead symbolizes the physical body that is in a similar condition. The robbers are our lawless thoughts that rob our body of its energy and substance. The priest and the Levite represent the ignorance and the indifference to truth that are found in both formal religion and law. The parable of the Good Samaritan teaches that the personal body as well as the social body is being robbed of life by ignorant, lawless thoughts, and that life will be restored if we exercise merciful, healing love. In other words, because of our spiritual potential, we can feel compassion for our fellow humans and ourselves, and not only restore, but continue the upward journey of mankind. The Good Samaritan is Christ in you, the hope of glory. So, it doesn't matter how dark the night, as long as there's life and hope and compassion, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. Because we have built into us, in our genetic makeup, something that we can't get rid of: compassion. We care about each other. I'd like to close with the song that the Mesilla Valley Chorale closed with, their concert on Mother's Day, just a couple of Sundays ago. No man is an island. No man is an island. No man stands alone. Each man's joy is joy to me. Each man's grief is my own. We need one another. So I will defend each man as my brother, each man as my friend. I saw the people gather, I heard the music start. The song that they were singing is ringing in my heart. No man is an island way out in the blue. We all look to the one above for our strength to renew. When I help my brother, then I know that I plant the seed of friendship that will never die. And I guess if we take one idea from this whole study, it's just no person is an island. We're not out here by ourselves. It's silly, it's simple to say it, but we're all in this together. And just to mention again what Bonnie said, the self-compassion workshop I'm going to be doing next month is about having compassion for ourselves and reminding ourselves that we're not alone in this. And if you got to think up some quick little affirmation to remind yourself of, just remember we're all in this together. Thank you.